Okay, if we could, we'll go ahead and call this evening's meeting. This is the August 9th meeting of the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Chris Jordan, and I'm the chairman of this commission. I would like to remind everyone here this evening, city staff and those sitting in the audience, as well as the commission members, if we would make sure to silence all of our electronic devices, phones, other computers, and things like that. I'd also like to remind our commission members and city staff, when using the microphone, to please turn it on. Those of you that will come up and testify, if you wish tonight, please come up, speak in the microphone, and speak clearly. We are taping these proceedings this evening. With that, we will start with introductions. I do not see our council liaison here yet. I'm not sure if he will not be here this evening. I've got other obligations. So we will start with our commission members.
Michelle Mahoney.
Michael Lester.
Penny Quigg.
Ann Strotman, city staff.
Bunny Tricky Cotton.
Dale Vaughn.
Shane Wade, city staff.
Eric Barron, city staff.
Ian Zollinger, city staff.
Brian Wolford, city staff.
Anna Naniski, city staff.
All right, thank you. Under procedural matters, the city code authorizes 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Alternates are designated to vote upon the absence or disqualification of a regular member. A quorum of 5 members or alternates is necessary to conduct business. I do believe we have the necessary quorum. We have the following members absent, regular members absent tonight, is Jack Deacon, Dean Dutoy, Blake Marcus, Chris Yarnell. Alternates that are absent are Matthew Hall and Hank Vaught. With that being said, is there any members here this evening or alternates that will be abstaining from any agenda items? I declare we have a quorum present. The voting members tonight will be Bunny Tricky Cotton, Michael Lester, Michelle Mahoney, Dale Vaughn, and Penny Quigg. Next, we'll have a call for cases. If you would, just raise your hand or a gesture to let us know that you're here to represent the case. Some of these cases this evening will be conducted by city staff. So our first case is case number P18017, 1720 Veith Drive. It is a rezoning from RS2 to RA1. Is there someone here? Thank you. Our next case is case number P18018, 2106 Jefferson Street and 2003 and 2007 Southridge Drive, rezoning from C1 and RS2 to PUD and preliminary PUD plan. Is there someone here to represent that case? Thank you. Case number P18019, Sunset Court and McKay Court, rezoning from RD to RS4 and comprehensive plan amendment. Is there someone here for that? City staff, thank you. Case number P18020, National Registry Historic Overlay District.
Mr. Ryan Molman, the city attorney, will be representing that. He's across the hall in the budget meetings, but he will be in attendance for that case.
Very good. Again, city staff. And then our last case this evening is case number P18021, text amendment pertaining to the expansion of local historic districts.
And I'll represent that case.
Okay. Again, city staff. Is there any reason for a continuance?
No.
Thank you. Is there any reason to reorder the agenda?
No.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move to the format, hearing of order of testimony. Ian, will you please read the format and hearing of testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to briefly describe the procedures of the Commission. The proceedings of this meeting are being recorded, so please step forward to the microphone when you speak and give your name and address for the record. The standing order of each case is as follows. After an introduction of the request by city staff, the applicant and their consultants will provide information on the request. The opening presentation by the applicant shall be limited to 10 minutes unless additional time is granted by the Commission. The applicant shall have 3 additional minutes for closing testimony if requested. We will then ask to hear from supporters of the request. We will then ask to hear from opponents of the request. We will then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. Testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes unless additional time is granted by the commission. City staff will then make their recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, reference to printed material, including staff reports and applicable findings, shall not be read into the record unless directed by the commission. The commission will close testimony from the floor. The commission will then discuss the proposal, then publicly make its determination with reasons. The form of the motion shall be positive, that is to say, the motion shall be made to accept the request as presented or with modifications, stipulations, or conditions. A final vote will be taken with ayes in favor, nays opposed. The chairman shall announce the results of the vote, specifying the number of votes cast in favor and the number of votes cast against. The following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting: the City Code of the City of Jefferson as amended, the Comprehensive Plan and Land Use Map, copies of the application under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, the affidavit of publication of the public notice in the newspaper, copies of drawings, plans, and or renderings under consideration, letters or memoranda from staff, staff reports, minutes of proceedings, correspondence or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, rules of procedure for the City of Jefferson, the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. These items are public record and available for inspection in the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the office of the city clerk. Please be advised that any items that are presented, distributed, or otherwise received pertaining to the cases under consideration become the property of the commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, petitions, and letters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Appreciate that. Next, we'll move to the adoption of the agenda.
Move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Ann has been nice enough to provide the minutes from the regular meeting of July 12th. If you would, take a few minutes to look over those, and when you're ready, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. I would like to say, last month, I was not here. I would like to mention that I appreciate everybody conducting business without me. It probably was a little bit smoother of a meeting. I know Mr. Yarnell chaired the meeting. Say thank you to him, as well as Penny Quigg was introduced last month, and glad to have her here tonight as well and on the commission with us. So,
Mr. Chair, if I may mention,
Yep.
I believe you were re-elected as chairman at that meeting as well.
well, I didn't mention that. I know how it is when you're not here. You get picked on a little bit. But no, I do appreciate that. Thank you. I enjoy doing it and appreciate all the commission members having confidence in me to do the job. So I will do that. Thank you. Good point. We do have some communication this evening that has been provided to us. I do believe we have one from Ken Kaufman at 5401 Old Loman Road. It's regarding case number P18017 for 1720 Veith Drive. That has been provided to us. If we as commission members would look at that. I believe from what I'm reading here, he is saying he is not opposed to the rezoning. We also have from Mike Leahay, if I'm saying that right, regarding case number P18020 from 1311 Moreland Avenue. I believe from what I'm reading here that he is supportive of that case tonight. So just want to let everybody know that we do have those correspondence that were transmitted to city staff. With that, we will open our public hearing and start our new business. We will start with case number P18017, 1720 Veith Drive. It is a rezoning from RS2 to RA1. Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to point out the location of the property. The property is located at 1720 Veith Drive. The nearest major intersection is here, just half a mile south of the property, at the intersection of Veith Drive and Route C. Here is the zoning of the property, as well as the zoning of the surrounding properties. Currently, the property is zoned RS2 single-family residential. There exists RS4 to the west and the PUD zoning here to the south. And I would like to go over just a little bit of some history of this property. In December 1968, the property was annexed into the city of Jefferson, with the zoning established as RS2 single-family residential. The zoning code in effect at the time allowed nursing homes as a conditional use of the RS2 district. And in December 1974, a conditional use permit was issued to the owners of the property to construct a nursing home, to be able to construct a nursing home. In 2002, the city code was amended to prohibit nursing homes in single-family residential zoning districts. In this city code, nursing homes are defined as residential care facilities, and the purpose of this request is so that the residential care facility, the nursing home, can come into compliance with the city code and conform to the zoning. Is the purpose of the request to RA1. I'm happy to answer any questions. And the applicant and their consultant is here as well to present.
Thank you, Ian. Do any commission members have any questions for Ian or other city staff at this point? Shane, I'm assuming since it's a rezoning that you don't have anything? Thank you. Okay, is there someone in the audience who'd like to present this case? If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Sampson, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. And also with me in the gallery is Mr. Ben Schulin, who is the operating officer for JMS Senior Living, who is the owner of the property. The property owner is the Jefferson City Manor. As Ian had mentioned, it's been operational on the property since 1974 and has remained in the Juckett family and their business operations since that time. About 2 years ago, they did an expansion on the building, and at that time we realized that the existing use of the property is basically a grandfathered use, and that the zoning code had changed. At that time, in order to meet their schedule with their expansion project, we went through there's a rarely used part of the city code that allows a one-time expansion of a non-conforming use, and that's what we did in order to get that project underway. But since that time, just in order to bring everything up to code and up with the zoning code, we wanted to go ahead and submit the rezoning application. That way, if anything else is done in the future, the rezoning part of it is taken care of, and there wouldn't be any further delays from a zoning perspective. If you look along the extent of Veith Drive, there's several other uses along that property which are non-residential in nature. There's a couple of churches. Cedar Hill School is located just to the north of this, so the use fits well in with the neighborhood and is not uncharacteristic of other uses in the neighborhood. With that, I would entertain any questions.
All right. Is there any questions for the applicant from the commissioners at this point? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Next, we'll ask if there's anyone in the audience who'd like to come forward and speak in favor of this request. If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. I'm seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak in opposition to this request? If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Lastly, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this request? If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we will now close testimony. And Ian, I'll come back to you with your staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff recommends approval of the proposed rezoning. The rezoning from RS2 to RA1 allows for the property to conform to zoning regulations. The development map of the comprehensive plan shows the property as designated for use as high-density residential, which supports the requested zoning. The current use of the property as a residential care facility is permitted in a RA1 zone.
Do any commission members have any questions for city staff at this point? Seeing none, we will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the request to rezone the property from RS2 to RA1.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries 5-0. This is a recommendation that will be forwarded on to the City Council. That is a public hearing as well. The City Council meeting for this will be when?
On September 17th.
Say that again?
September 17th at 6 p.m. in these chambers.
Okay. Thank you. Give me just a quick second here. I've got a question for city staff. Thank you. We'll move on to our next case. It is case number P18018, 2106 Jefferson Street and 2003 and 2007 Southridge Drive. It is a rezoning from C-1 and RS-2 to PUD and a preliminary PUD plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ian, give us a little bit of information on it.
I will like to point out the location of the property. Here's the property here. The nearest major intersection is Southwest Boulevard and Jefferson right here. The property has frontage on 2 streets in Jefferson and Southridge right here. The zoning of the property is displayed here, and I have to make a correction here that the property is being rezoned from C1 and RS2 as well as RD. There is a small portion of the property here that is zoned RD. So the zoning is from those two PUD. The applicant has acquired 2 acres of property just out here, adjacent to their existing 12-acre facility. There are 2 parts of this request. The first portion is the zoning portion, the rezoning from RS2 and C1 and RD to PUD, and the other portion is the preliminary PUD plan. The rezoning is so that they can include these newly acquired properties, so the entire property is zoned in the same zoning district. The preliminary PUD plan portion of the request is to accommodate the construction of 3 new buildings. 2 of the buildings here are meant to be replaced with 2 new buildings. And then the third is meant to be placed over here where these structures currently exist, these 3 structures. Those structures will be removed from the property and replaced with that 3rd building. So here's the PUD plan. And as you can see, the 2 buildings here are removed and 2 new buildings in its place, and the 3rd building here in this corner of the property, replacing where those 3 structures were. And here we have a close-up of the area where the 3rd new building will be placed, accompanied with a buffer yard and sufficient screening. This preliminary PUD plan is being presented to be built in phases. There may be a period of time until this 3rd building can be built, and if there is a period of time between when the current structures are removed and the building is built, the applicant and consultant have addressed this with what an intermediate buffering plan that's part of the preliminary PUD as displayed here. So here the intermediate buffering plan, it shows the removal of these existing structures. It also shows a mixture of open space and natural and evergreen buffering allowed by city code. It also shows a temporary chain link fence to be installed until the time comes when the building will be constructed. It is important to note, although this PUD is shown in that it is shown to be constructed in phases, it may be constructed all at the same time. The PUD is to allow the applicant some flexibility in their plans. The applicant and their consultants are here, and I am happy to answer any questions as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Ian or other city staff at this point? Shane, once again, I'm assuming that you have nothing on this right now? At the end? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to come forward and tell us a little bit more about your project? If you would, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Adam Weber. I'm the Director of Operations at Central Electric Power Co-op, and we are located at 2106 Jefferson Street. And I wanted to give a little bit of background because I'm sure most of you are probably not very familiar with Central Electric, but we are one of 6, we call them G&T, but generation and transmission cooperatives in the state of Missouri. And we provide wholesale power to 8 distribution cooperatives. So you probably are familiar with, say, Three Rivers Electric Co-op or Callaway or Boone. Those are some of our members who actually own us. But we sell wholesale power to them, not to the end user. So that's why the business is not something that a lot of you are familiar with probably. Our service territory, we operate about 1,600 miles of transmission line between the Lake of the Ozarks and Moberly, and between Sedalia to the west and St. Charles County to the east. So Jefferson City area is a relatively central location for our office building. So our office building that we are in now was constructed in 1965, and we added on to a warehouse, or we added a warehouse in 1993. We added on to the office in 2001. We added some parking area in 2007, and we added a large warehouse in 2009. So the trend is that we have been growing over the years. And we've, in the last 2 years, done a 20-plus, 25-year-plus plan for our business model. And we have determined that we need more office space. We need to remodel or rebuild the office, and that's why we have been acquiring more property. So that is part of our master plan. Just as a business, we have roughly 100 employees, and all but 4 of those employees report to the Jefferson City office each day. So the employees are local to the Jefferson City area. In fact, many of us have to be within 30 minutes of the office for employment. In general, the nature of our business requires a lot of large equipment and substations and transmission lines. A lot of that equipment is not readily available, so we have to stock a lot of things to be prepared for, all kinds of things that we see on a day-to-day basis. So we keep a lot of large equipment in inventory. We also have a lot of large trucks and trailers, bucket trucks, cranes, to do our work, thus the need for a lot of the warehouse space that we do have. So it is mostly for spare and new equipment, as well as our vehicle fleet. And I mentioned earlier that the employees are local to the Jeff City area. Our desire is to keep our headquarters in the Jefferson City area. Specifically, our desire is to keep it at the existing site. And that's why we have gone to obtain more property in the last year. And I think Patrick will be adding some more.
Good evening. Patrick Kramer, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. So I just wanted to, I know Ian touched on the 3 buildings that we're going to be adding. We're removing 2 in particular. There's actually one more piece of a warehouse building on the northern part of the site where we'll be removing a piece of that building to improve circulation on the site. Regarding the new constructed buildings, the existing office would be tore down with the exception of the 2001 expansion. A new 33,000 square foot 2-story office building would be constructed. The expansion would tie into the 2001 addition and be oriented similar to the existing office building they have now. To touch on the finishes a little bit of that building, it's going to be probably a metal frame building with some masonry veneers, so it'll be an attractive building. The parking lot on that site will be oriented a little bit different than it is now, so it'll be configured along the Jefferson Street frontage and kind of wrapping around the western part of the new building. The existing warehouse that's being removed at the central part of the site will be 27,000 square foot. It'll be 2 stories, vehicle storage building, and it'll be connected to the new office building. And that building will be consistent with the existing warehouse that was built in 2009. The building being constructed at the northwest corner of the site is 11,250 square feet, and it'll be a single-story building with a stem wall underneath. The construction materials for that building will be a combination of materials utilized on the 2009 edition, but then we're also going to incorporate some finished materials that match the character of the residential site to the east and north, or west and north, excuse me. The existing buildings that are on the properties that were purchased by CEPC, they're currently still on their respective properties, and they will be left in place and possibly utilized as employee space whenever the new office building will be constructed. So Going a little bit further into the plan, we're proposing to construct sidewalks along South Ridge Drive and Red Oak Drive. That would basically almost complete the sidewalk construction along all of Central Electric's frontage. We're proposing type C buffering between all residential zoned areas. And Evan, or Ian, if you would pull up that Exhibit C, we'd be able to look at that a little bit closer. So we'd be using a mixture of open space, natural, and evergreen buffering, like Ian was speaking about earlier. The orange area up there would be open space. The blue would be a natural area. And the natural area would basically just allowing everything that's there as is, trees and vegetation, and starting construction on the inner portion of that. The evergreen portion, or the evergreen portion of the buffer yard is the green area on the exhibit. It would basically start on the west side of their property and wrap around the south side of Southridge Drive, and we're actually proposing to extend that a little bit further to screen some of their existing storage yards that are there now. There will be a retaining wall on that northern side, kind of wrapping around from Red Oak Drive to Southridge Drive. That retaining wall, it could end up being fairly large, within the 7-8 feet range. So we're planning on softening that a bit. So we would propose either painting that wall with neutral colors, using some sort of segmental stone retaining wall system, or maybe form liners to dress that up a little bit better. The goal is to blend all that area into the residential neighborhood that's adjoining the property. So, stormwater for this property, we're proposing adding a detention basin on the western side of the property. It would kind of be in the area of the natural buffer yard there. We would pick up a storm drain from the northern part of the site and from the parking lot on the south part of the site, and direct it to that western detention pond. Those calculations will be designed, that portion of it will be designed as we go through the site plan process. Parking lot lighting will be considered through the final site plan and will conform to city code. It's anticipated that the proposed buildings will have building mounting lights and the storage yards would have site security lighting, and then lighting would be directed or shielded from the residential areas to keep light from spilling over to off of the neighboring properties. So with that, I would entertain any questions.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the commissioners at this point for the applicant or engineer?
Yes, sir. You may have already explained this, but the purple stripe, the blue one on our plan, that's just a amount of, you're going to leave those trees there if you were to develop on the rest of that property, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a 35-foot strip, and it'll be left in place as is.
Okay, gotcha.
Is there any other questions for the applicant or engineer from commissioners at this point? Thank you. Thank you both.
I can give you a card.
That would be nice.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we'll ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this request. If so, please come forward and give your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this request? If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Lastly, I'll ask if there is anyone who would like to speak on this request. Seeing none. At this point, we will close public testimony. Ian, I'll ask for your staff report.
Staff recommends approval of the proposed rezoning and preliminary PUD plan. The rezoning from RD and RS2 and C1 to PUD, and approve the preliminary PUD allows the expansion of the site, and the plant buffer yard would protect the integrity of the nearby residential neighborhood.
Thank you, Ian. Shane, I think you said you have something for us this evening?
Just briefly, I'll go over our review of the preliminary PUD plan. As far as infrastructure in the vicinity, most all is in place currently to serve the existing site. In regard to site improvements, as Mr. Kramer had indicated, the stormwater drainage detention basin would address any increase in impervious area from the site and address both stormwater detention and stormwater quality. Sanitary sewer exists currently on site. Street access, I believe the current street access points are on Southridge Drive and on Jefferson Street. The location of the entrance on Jefferson Street is proposed to go relocate to the south and to the west just a bit, and that would be MoDOT controlled access and would need a permit from MoDOT to occur. Sidewalk, as Mr. Kramer had indicated, is proposed along Southridge and Red Oak Drive to complete the frontage along the proposed property. Utilities, streetlights, and fire hydrants are all existing in the vicinity, and engineering staff would support approval of this request.
Thank you, Shane. Do any of the commission members have any questions for any of city staff? All right. Seeing none, we will entertain a motion.
Move to approve the request to rezone the property from RS2 and C1 to PUD.
And if
I'm gonna ask for an amendment, Bunny.
yeah, if that motion can include the RS2 and C1 and RD to
Oh,
PUD.
and RD.
So you're saying a rezoning from C1,
RS2 and
RD
RD to PUD.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Again, this motion carries 5-0. It will be forwarded to the city council again, where it will be a public hearing, correct?
Yes.
Again, when would that meeting take place?
September 17th at 6 p.m. here in these chambers.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, and there is also a second motion as well. The motion for the preliminary PUD.
Move to, for approval of the preliminary PUD plan with the establishment of the underlying zoning of the M1 light industrial for the purpose of determining signage and lighting allowances.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second on that. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Again, that motion carries 5-0. Very good. Thank you. I think our presenter is arriving.
No. We sent you a message.
Huh? Oh, we did?
Not for this case.
Oh. Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
This one's on us. Okay. All right. I would like to make a mention now. We should have probably done it at the beginning of the meeting, but city ordinance states that testimony for the applicant is limited to 10 minutes, and that testimony for anyone wishing to discuss on an agenda item is 3 minutes, correct?
That is correct, a 3-minute limit for general testimony during the public hearing.
A lot of times we don't bring that up when we don't have a lot of cases or a lot of issues or whatever, but would like everyone to know that. We'll try to treat everyone fairly on their time. We've had a quite lengthy agenda here a couple weeks ago, and we used that, and I think it went fairly well. So anyway, we'll move on to the next case. Our case number is P18019, Sunset Court and McKay Court rezoning from RD to RS4 and a comprehensive plan amendment. Anna, I think you're going to tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to orient you to the rezoning area. A little closer, sorry. So Sunset Court and McKay Court, they are south of McKay Park. Southwest Boulevard runs north-south, and the next biggest intersection is right here at Southwest Boulevard and Southridge Drive. The existing zoning is RD, residential duplex. The area was rezoned from RS2 to RD in 1976, and the Sunset Acres subdivision, which incorporates this area, was established in 1990. And currently, only single-family homes reside within the rezoning area. The proposed rezoning contains 12 RD-zoned properties along Sunset Court, and then 6 properties on the east side of McKay Court. And the parcel owned by Missouri American Water Company, which is right here, is also included in the rezoning. The purpose of this staff-initiated rezoning is to bring the existing single-family properties into proper zoning district for their existing use. The proposed RS4 single-family residential district would also preserve the existing single-family character of the area. Again, only single-family homes exist within this rezoning area. As seen on the map, there are small pieces of RS2 which are incorporated into this rezoning, and that is so that the new zoning district matches the property lines, so that none of the properties have the double zoning, as you can see here in 1727 and 1716 on Sunset Lake. The comprehensive plan identifies the area as low-density residential, which has not manifested, but the proposed comprehensive plan amendment would support this action. So there are a lot of zoning districts kind of involved here. You might be asking, why RS4? Well, I'm going to go over a few of them just so you can understand why the RS4 zoning district is best for this rezoning. So again, to start off with the RD district, this is a medium density residential single family attached district. So there can be single family homes or duplexes on what I like to call small lots. In comparison to an RS1 district, which is a low-density residential single-family detached zoning district, which you might see in a typical suburban-style neighborhood. And these single-family homes on large lots are not reflective of what is happening on Sunset or McKay Courts. But the RS4 district is a medium-density residential single-family detached district, which means that there are single-family homes on small lots, very similar in size to what is happening on the RD lots currently zoned. So to put things in perspective, this sort of downzoning to RS4 better represents the existing conditions that are on Sunset and McKay Court and would preserve the single-family character of the neighborhood. Let's say in the case where a duplex were to be located there, or if any of the homes wanted to convert to a duplex. Planning staff hosted a open house on July 31st. I've had this open house was so any residents can come ask us questions and learn more about the rezoning. I have had no other correspondence since that open house, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Anna. Do any of the commission members have any questions for Anna or any other city staff at this point? I might pose one question to you. When you looked at changing the boundaries out there, from what I'm seeing is your zoning line runs along the one side of McKay Court. Did you ever consider, jumping over and picking all of McKay Court, the homes along both sides, or do you feel with the size of the lots and everything, this is a good boundary?
When we rezone for the district, we usually typically do the matching the property lines and then to the center line of the street, if I'm correct on that.
So I think you're asking whether the properties on the west side of McKay Court were, to be included in there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was really necessary. They are already zoned a single-family district. There's no mismatch between the zoning and the use for those properties, and so it really wasn't necessary from from a zoning perspective to change them.
So then the properties on the east side of McKay Court were zoned RD.
Yes, and I think the zoning boundaries were established, I believe, prior to the subdivision, and so it's basically something. It could almost be referred to as a legacy zoning that just is mismatched with how it was developed.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you both for your answers. Is there any other questions for city staff from the commissioners? Okay. Next, we will ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this request. If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition of this request. Seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this request? Seeing none. At this point, we will close public testimony. Ian and I will ask for your staff report.
Staff recommends.
I'm sorry, I said Ian, didn't I? I'm sorry.
It's okay. Staff recommends approval of the comprehensive plan amendment and the rezoning plan as the staff presented.
All right.
2 motions for that, please.
Again, Ray asked, we're going to have 2 motions. One is for the rezoning, and then the second one will be the comprehensive plan amendment.
Respectively, if we could ask for it to be the other way around, first the comprehensive plan amendment and then the rezoning as staff proposed.
Okay. Do any commission members have any questions for Anna or other city staff? If not, I will entertain a motion for the comprehensive plan amendment.
I move to approve the comprehensive plan amendment request to show the property as medium density detached residential on the comprehensive plan development plan map.
Second.
We're good. We're good. Right? We're good. Yep. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next, we will do the rezoning.
I move to approve the rezoning plan for the area as presented by staff.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All against? Motion carries 5-0. Again, this will be forwarded to the city council. Will that be the September 17th?
Correct.
September 17th at 6 p.m. in this room. All righty. Next, we will move to our next case, case number P18020, the National Register Historic Overlay District. I believe our city councilor will be presenting this evening.
That's correct.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about it, please.
Sure thing. So what we're proposing here is 2 things. First is the creation of an overlay district. And just briefly, an overlay district is a zoning designation that lays on top of existing zoning or base zoning. So in many places in the city, there is existing zoning or base zoning, and overlay districts identify unique areas within the city where additional zoning regulations are necessary to address the unique situations. The most common, probably, overlay district in the city is the floodplain overlay. So that's just an example of something that the city does with overlay districts. So with an overlay district, it does not affect the underlying zoning. It just adds additional requirements, protections, regulations on top of the existing or base zoning, and those two work together and cooperate. So what we're doing in this particular case is creating a new overlay zone called the National Register Historic Overlay District. And what this overlay district does, it is placed, proposed to be placed on top of all the areas within the city that are historic districts listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And what we are trying to accomplish with this district is to afford those properties that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places protections that may be afforded under state or federal law, but which require an affirmative act or affirmative zoning to take advantage of those rights, benefits, or protections. So unlike a regular or more typical overlay zone, this overlay zone is not attempting to create any additional requirements or restrictions on properties within the overlay district. Instead, and you can take a look at the language that would accompany the overlay zone. There's really one rule in our district, and I'm just going to quote directly from it. It says the National Register Historic Overlay District is hereby zoned as historic, and within the NR district, all rights, benefits, and protections afforded under state or federal law to properties and locations included on the National Register of Historic Places are hereby reserved to the fullest extent allowed by law. And it goes on to state that the boundaries of the NR district are deemed to extend to and include all interior and adjacent public rights of way. So what we're trying to do, if state or federal law has some sort of benefit or right or a protection that it affords to something located on or listed on the National Register of Historic Districts, what this is attempting to do is saying we are reserving those rights for our areas within the city. It is an affirmative act. And I'm going to give you an example of how we anticipate this to play out in real life. The Missouri General Assembly this year enacted a new state law under HB 1991. HB 1991 relates to deployment of small wireless antennas and facilities. And in HB 1991, it changes the relationship between cell phone providers and cities when it comes to the deployment of small cells. Generally, these are cells that are reduced in size from a typical cell tower, and they're usually only 30 to 40 feet off of the ground, usually only one or two antennas, usually concealed in some way, but they are deployed typically not on tall towers, the typical way you see cell phone antennas deployed now, but on individual towers. So there's going to be a lot more of these antennas throughout the city because they use higher frequency wavelengths, so they're more powerful, but they don't go as far. So you need more of them to cover areas within the city. And so as part of that technology, they sit down lower. And so the model of deployment that telecoms are looking to do is not place these on private property, but rather place these in the rights of way. And so in HB 1991, 1991, they changed the rules that exist between cities and telecom, and it says where these facilities are deployed in the rights of way, the cities really don't have too much say on how these get deployed, where they get deployed, really what they look like beyond some pretty basic safety types of regulations. However, in HB 1991, there was an exception that was carved out for, and I'm going to quote from the statute, areas that are zoned as historic. And so when you use that language, zoned, that means areas that have gone through a P&Z public hearing type process under Chapter 89 of the statutes. So of course, our properties, our areas in the city that are on the National Register of Historic Places did not go through a Chapter 89 city public process to get listed on the National Register. That is a federal process that the city is not really particularly involved in, and certainly not involved in through an 89 process. So what we are attempting to do is, in order to ensure that these properties on the National Register list can take advantage of the carve-out that is specifically given to historic districts in HB 1991. We are now taking these areas through that process to ensure that when companies want to deploy small wireless antennas in facilities in the National Register areas, that basic rule that the cities have to grant permits as of right, and we don't really have too much to say, the carve-out allows cities to take them through a public process, essentially either a CUP process or a special exception process. So we can take it from a as of right process where neither the city nor the public have really too much opportunity to give any type of input, and change it to a public process where the public can give input on how they think these facilities can impact their neighborhoods, and give the city a greater ability to work with the telecom companies to figure out deployment solutions that best serve the people of the city, the aesthetics, and the historic character of our National Register districts. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish with this regulations. And the reason you're seeing it now is because HB 1991 puts a deadline on these districts. It says that areas that this exception only applies to areas that are zoned as historic as of August 28th, 2018. And so there's a temporal cutoff. So if these districts have not been zoned as historic as of that cutoff date, then they are unable to take advantage of this historic carve out. And so we are trying to take advantage of this historic carve out, not only to address the exceptions and protections that are specified in HB 1991, but also for any other state or federal regulations that requires an affirmative act to reach out and grab protections for our National Register of Historic Places. This is our affirmative act. This is our proof that we have said, yes, we want these protections for our National Register places here in the city. And so specifically, it is proposed to be deployed in 7 areas here listed on the are shown on the map. Those areas are the Missouri State Capitol Historic District, the Capitol Avenue Historic District, the Moreau Drive Historic District, Lincoln University Hilltop Campus District, the Broadway Dunklin Historic District, the Munichburg Commercial Historic District, and the Hobo Hill Historic District. So, so essentially 2 actions here: creation of the overlay, and then implementation of the new overlay on these 7 areas. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to help out.
At this point, do any of the commission members have any questions for Ryan regarding this case? I might ask a general question, if I may.
Sure.
From what I'm absorbing here this evening in your testimony, are you telling me that these districts have already been established within our community, and that this case tonight, which obviously will be forwarded to the city council for their decisions, we're not really creating any new districts? These already exist?
They exist under federal law. They exist through a federal process. And so what we're trying to do is really mimic that process and take it through the Chapter 89 zoning process. So that way we can take advantage of the protections which are reserved to areas that are zoned as historic. Zoned is a term of art, and it can only really mean zoned through a local process. There's no such thing as federal zoning. And so yes, these districts already exist, but they exist as a matter of federal law. We are trying to make them also exist contemporaneously under local law as well. It's kind of dual protection. It may be a way to think about it.
And with your example that you gave of this new cell tower opportunity, you're saying in these districts, if this is passed, it would be a more stringent workload upon the cell tower companies to come in and say, we want to build one of these utility facilities. And in this district, you might say, well, it needs to be designed this way, you know, maybe a pole or whatever that is more historically designed. Whereas in a regular subdivision, say somewhere where I live, it's just zoned RS2, they could come and put this utility in at will.
Yes, that's a fine way to think. Yeah, I think that's correct. I hesitate to say more stringent, but it gives the city the ability to urge the cell phone companies to deploy in a manner that is going to be less impactful on historic districts. It makes it a public process, and when you have a public process that ultimately has to get approved by a body like the Board of Adjustment or the city council, there's an ability, an increased negotiation power.
So with this new tower, you're looking at, this is truly a utility now, and these cell phone companies can come into neighborhoods, residential, commercial, or whatever, and build these utility boxes or poles or whatever it is, like I said, at will.
Yes, I mean it's a fairly complicated process, but boiled down to its essence, yes. So, just to be fair, there is a similar protection that is carved out for single-family residential areas, but it doesn't require this affirmative act to take advantage of the protection. So when you say residential, that's limited, and there is a permitting process that goes along with it. But as long as, in a general case, as long as there is compliance with some pretty basic safety type regulations, they can really put them wherever they want.
I guess what I'm kind of getting at for myself, I'm envisioning my house, and all of a sudden I come home one day and there's I don't know, an 8 or 10 or 12-foot pole in my front yard because, you know, ABC phone company decides that's where they want one of these towers. And, you know, they have the right-of-way, the utility easements through there, and just for the general public, I guess you're saying in a sense this could happen.
It could. There's some restrictions on new poles. The typical deployment is on existing poles. That's primarily what they're doing. The more typical situation that you're going to see is I already have a utility pole in my front yard and it's 25 feet tall. Now it's 35, 40 feet tall and it has an antenna on top. That would probably be a more typical situation that an average person would face.
Thank you for your help with that. Any other questions of city staff? All right. If not, we will move on. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this request? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition of this request? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this request? Seeing none. At this point, I will close public testimony. Ryan, is there any closing arguments you would have for us, sir?
No, I think I covered it, but if there's any remaining questions that we have to
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Ryan or other city staff?
In our packet, the form of the motion, you have one motion, but it sounded like maybe you wanted two motions.
The form of the motion in the packet is sufficient to do what we need to do. If it's the council, or sorry, the commission's pleasure to break it up, we can do that. But the form of the motion, I think, takes care of what we need to do here. They're pretty inextricably linked together.
We'll go simple and try to go with one. I know no one believes city government does that, but we'll try. With that being said, I will entertain a motion.
I move for the approval of case number P18020 to amend the text of Chapter 35 zoning code to create the National Register Historic Overlay District and to amend the official zoning map to implement the National Register District in the 7 areas identified in the packet. Do you want me to name those?
Do you want those named, or are you fine with? Very good. Thank you, sir. Is there any discussion? Oh, we haven't had a second yet. I'm sorry. We need a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries 5-0. I'm assuming that this will be forwarded on to the city council again for that September 17th meeting?
No, we've actually advanced the timeline on this matter.
Okay.
It is scheduled for a public hearing in front of the city council on Monday, August 20th. That is the next meeting of the city council. That meeting will take place here in this room at 6 p.m.
Okay, 6 p.m., August 20th, and that is a public hearing again, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Okay. Lastly, we will move on to case number P18021. It's a text amendment pertaining to the expansion of local historic districts. Eric, I think we're back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so this is this case is a staff initiated, or actually more specifically a city council initiated request to amend the text of, and that is a mistake up there. It is not Chapter 35. It is actually Chapter 8 of the city code being amended. It's largely as a result of the School Street Local Historic District case that appeared in front of the council 2 months ago and proceeded on to the city council for public hearing. At that hearing, there was a lot of public comment that was presented with a desire to expand the boundaries of that proposed district to include one specific property, the Quinn Chapel Church. There was some discussion amongst the city council and also the city councilor regarding the method of trying to accommodate those types of public comments. And the end result was city council directed staff to prepare a amendment to the city code that allows for an expansion of an existing district. The matter was that it was very difficult to amend the application that was presented in front of you. There was really no mechanism to amend that application without having to start all over. It is a very cumbersome type of process. So what this would put in place is a mechanism to expand a district once it is established so that additional properties could be included in it. The existing city code does not have any language that allows for that type of expansion. I don't know if at the time it just wasn't envisioned that would be necessary. But that is the purpose of the request. And so this is the language that would be added into Chapter 8 of the city code. Basically, after a district is established, it would allow for additional property owners to petition to be included within that district. If it's a small number of property owners, I believe the magic number is 10. If it's less than 10, then it can be done just by petition of all 9 or fewer of those property owners. So anything between 1 and 9. But if it's greater than 10, then it falls into the normal requirement of having at least 75% of the property owners, which was the normal threshold for establishment of a district. So that would be held for an addition to the district as well. That I believe is all I have to present on it. This case is not specific to the School Street district, although it is coming up as a result of that proposal. Is also not any kind of vote on including the church, the Quinn Chapel, into that district. It would merely put in place the mechanism for them to have the option to pursue that route. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have prior to opening the public hearing.
Thank you, Eric. Do any commissioners have any questions for Eric at this point? All right, seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to come forward and speak in favor of this request? If so, please come and give your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Jane Beadham. I have property at 1612 Payne Drive, and I'm speaking in favor of this staff proposal to allow expansion of an existing historic district because that doesn't currently exist in the code. This language follows the amendment process used for the National Register of Historic Places. Basically allows that abutting properties may be added to a district. Similarly, a property could be taken away if it burned or was destroyed or lost its historic character. So I would speak in favor of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any commission members have any questions? Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this request? If so, please come forward. If you would, give us your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Lori Sims, and I reside on 1834 Cedar Ridge Road. And before I say that I'm in favor, I do have a question. As I look at this language, it says once the district is established. So this is not allowing to amend the application. This is amending the district after it is approved. Is that correct?
I'll let city staff answer it, but my thought is from what their staff report was that would be yes, but I'll let Eric answer that for you, ma'am.
And I will try to answer that right away. It puts in place a mechanism for expansion of a district, and so there's really no way to amend the application in order to include the church. I think what the city council was seeking was a mechanism to add the church in. It would basically be a separate application by the church. The way that this would proceed after the Planning and Zoning Commission makes its recommendation to the City Council, this item would appear in front of them. If approved, then that mechanism would be in place. Currently, the City Council has placed the matter of the School Street Historic District on their informal calendar. It's basically a holding spot waiting for something else to occur. And that is namely this mechanism. So the City Council at that point could pull that item off of the informal calendar and vote on it at that point in order to establish the district. That would put the district in place and would allow the church to apply at their own leisure to be added into the district. I believe many of the public comments and the council heard those comments and was specifically trying to put this mechanism in place to allow for the church to be added into. So that application would have to go through the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing process, also the Historic Preservation Commission, and then on to the City Council. So it's about a 2 to 3 month timeline just to add that property into the district. So that is one route that the City Council could pursue, creation of the district and allowing the church to proceed at their own leisure. The other route is a little bit more difficult because of the 2 to 3 month timeline of incorporating an additional property into the district, having to go through this public hearing procedure, which is basically required by law. That they can only hold a matter in front of the City Council for a certain amount of time, and I believe it would be testing that time limit to hold it long enough for that to go through the entire process. I hope that answers your question in terms of no, that the church would not be added into that application. That basically is not possible. It would have to go through its own application process. Now, how the city council deals with it in terms of how they vote on the initial district and the church and the different timelines there is really a matter for the city council to address.
And to be clear, if we were to follow this process, if this expansion were approved and the church were to apply, then I understand we would go through the same process that the initial application went through?
That is correct.
And would be approved by the various commissions and then the city council?
Assuming approval, but yes, I think that there's a lot of public support for it.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this request? Please come forward. Do me a favor, ma'am. Come to the microphone and state your name and address, and then we'll be glad to answer them.
No problem. I'm Mintha Bolton Bakari. I reside at 1310 Linden Drive. I have a few questions and some concerns, simply because the cornerstone of our community has always been the spiritual foundation or the religious foundations. You can go to the internet and find 3 of the major cities that the church is still standing, even though the communities have been compromised either by eminent domain or some other method. Pennytown in the Boot Heel, refer to that. Pinhook also in the Boot Heel area. Kinloch is more known by most people that by eminent domain, the airport displaced that community. But each community, the stronghold has been the church. And so when someone says we're going to do an African American district, a black district, and the church is left out, I don't know what kind of research was done. I don't know who was referred to. I'm relatively new in the city, from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But I know that all over the nation, you have Rosewood in Florida. You have Hayti in the Carolinas who faced this same issue, and nothing was done. Pinhook here in Missouri was supposed to be compensated for. Those plans have not gone through. Kinloch has gone from 4,000 people to 300, barely struggling. All of these communities have gone back to the church that still stands on these grounds for some reason, and we know the reason. But they go back and they celebrate what was built from their ancestors. And so to even have to go through this process and this questioning, it's just a puzzlement to me. And it just, you know, I don't know why legalities supposedly hold such a stronghold in allowing the foundation of any African American historical district. I don't understand why that occurs, especially when legalities weren't looked at when these communities were destroyed. And is this new thing going to be destroyed in terms of the content, the family closeness, the safety, when the anchor has been left out? And so we can talk about what's legal. We've always talked about that. But the actuality of it, has it occurred? Did you find legal ways to make these places disappear? And what about the ways that you need to compensate for this? For compromising these 3 places, right here in Missouri.
I'm not going to interrupt you. I'm going to give you 1 more minute.
Okay. But I really want people to think about that. And did I ask 3 questions? Can anybody answer any of the questions that I asked?
Are you done asking questions?
I think so, but
Okay.
you know how that is.
Okay. Well, if I may, I don't know that we can answer some of the questions that you have of what this district will do for the neighborhood and the community. But I will tell you from what I believe has been said by the city staff that this, and yourself, that this is a legal process that we have to go through. And without amending the original application, the city council directed staff and believes that this is the best avenue to have the opportunities to grow this district, whether it's the church or other properties. And I believe that's what city staff brought to us this evening.
The last time I was at a meeting, they asked the author of this bill, this process, if she would be amenable to whatever it took to right the wrong. She said yes. And so there are legal processes in every city that you can always find a way around. And that would also be legal. It's been done time after time after time to disrupt communities. So how about a time to build a community? And see, I don't want to hear a whole lot about who's going to lose their house because of floods, because in this document that was used as well. We have Hurricane Katrina that we can look at that was a major national one. And so then when does the creation of a so-called African American historic district concentrate on the meat as opposed to the financial piece being concentrated on of we're going to lose this and we're going to lose this, financial. But is it a complete package? I know, just a half a second.
Let's wrap it up, please.
Is it a complete package of a real historical district, or is this just a way to get some more money to save your property as a landowner?
Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Is there any other questions for her?
Oh, I'm sorry. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We do have a question for you.
Oh, good. I love questions.
So I guess my question is, what is your solution? You know, in government, I have an MPA, and I was taught that all change is incremental. So, you know, we're here, and now we're going to move up. We're identifying a path that would ultimately resolve your concern, but it seems that's not, you know.
It seems that it's not good enough for me, right?
We're going A to B, and you want to go. What I'm hearing is you say you want to go A to Z.
Of course.
So
absolutely.
So, what would your ideal solution be in 15 seconds or less?
When they asked the creator of this proposition, would she be amenable to making the changes, since that's the person that can make the changes, can make the amendments of the original proposal? And she said yes. So how about that route? How about that route? Because you know the answers. How about that route?
Thank you, ma'am. We will continue on. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak in favor of this request?
Mr. Chairman, I want to clarify that I was not speaking in favor. I just came to ask for clarity.
Okay.
That was not me speaking in favor.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. If you're coming forward, you're speaking in favor of this request. If not, please hold your testimony. Okay. There's a point where you can just come up and speak at the end, and we'll give you that opportunity, and and you can, yeah, sure.
In favor of it, but I have a concern with one sentence that I feel like we need adjusted to accommodate the community.
Very good. I'll have you come up when we just have kind of open testimony. Yep, we'll do that. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak in favor of this request? Are you in favor of the request, or would you like to just generally speak? Let's wait till the end until it's just kind of what I'm going to call open testimony.
Well, but I might want to either or, against or favor, but I need to ask the question so I'll know where to.
I can't make that decision until we get there. At this point in testimony, we're those that know that they came to this evening and that are in favor of that request.
Okay, one more question. If I choose to speak on one of the either or, and then at the very end, am I allowed to speak again on just open testimony?
I think you're going to be given the opportunity to speak once this evening in open testimony. And when you, at open testimony, if you'd like to state your comments or concerns or questions, then you can obviously at that point then say whether you're for or against this.
Thank you.
That work fair enough?
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, again, we are asking anyone in the audience who'd like to come forward and speak in favor of this request. I'm seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak in opposition, only in opposition for this request? If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. I'm seeing none. Lastly, we'll call it open testimony. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this request? If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Ma'am, would you like to come up? I think this will be your opportunity. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Patsy Johnson. I'm a resident and live at 908 Lafayette Street. So there is one block that separates my home and the School Street historic neighborhood. This is the area that I love, and people that live, you know, I've grown up in this area, so it's very important to me. I am actually pretty much in support of the text. And as this, I want to make sure the text is what you're voting on tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
The expansion of the text that will go in the city code. Okay, that is where my concern lies. I'm supportive of everything within the text except for the sentence that says such partials shall be directly abutting to the established historic neighborhood. And the reason that brings up concern for me is there are people that are in the flood zone, designated flood zone, and part of the block of 908 Lafayette Street. So it's like the 700 and 800, and it's only probably about 10 houses or 8, something like that. I don't know the exact number. I should have checked right before I left, but I didn't. But these are people that care about their homes. Some of it's Lincoln University property. There is only one block that separates that area. The block has no homes. It's Lincoln University property. Okay, and since we're modifying this at this time to be able to have other homes apply, and of course it's already been stated that they would have to apply and go through the same process, just like Quinn Chapel. And so I already know that some of these homes want to be added, and they are tied to the same history of the area. This is rich history and important history to the people in this area. And it's unifying for them to be able to apply and be added at that time, opposed to having to go start over, reorganize, and start a whole different district in the same proximity. And so verbiage can be put in here, or this can be left out to where it does not limit to abutting property. And so that is my statement, so other properties can apply and be included in this process. I've already spoke to some of the city council people, and there are people that already know, and I know that, you know, they're already looking at that. So I would just like to ask of this committee to consider the people that are looking at the same fate that the people in the historical that have applied for the historical neighborhood are looking at, trying to protect their property and preserve the rich history of this African American community. We're tied together in that area, even though there is one block of homes that are, one block that separates it. But the history and everything else ties us together. Okay. And I don't think it's too difficult to do. Just like it's written to be included, it can be taken out or added in such a general way that these people can apply.
Thank you.
And so I ask your support in that.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Patsy?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. You're fine. Any questions?
I kind of have a question.
Sure.
In what way do you feel that you would benefit from that being added to that? You know, a lot of the foot there, you know, obviously they have the whole issue with floodplain and not, you know, the 50-50 rule and stuff like that.
Sure.
But it's the most restrictive. I guess that district would be the most restrictive on your property that you would have, which means that you would have to get permission to almost do anything on the exterior. Am I right?
Sure.
You know, is that something that you find beneficial, or is it just being included?
No, it's the 50-50 rule. It's the 50-50 rule.
So your property's also in the.
My property particularly is not.
Is not.
No, I'm on the upper end of Weirds Creek. It's the ones that are on the lower end of Weirds Creek. I just happen to be like 3 houses up. But I know that my neighbors that are facing this fate, and they mean something to me. Some of them are relatives, and other people I just, you know, I
so
care about.
So it's not just about your property?
No, it's not about my property. I love and I care about this area. I care about the history of the area, and you know, I care about it all.
Sure.
You know, and it means something to me. I don't want to drive down that street 20 years from now and see all green space.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that. Because we as a community have invested too much in that. And the people that live in that area have invested a lot in their homes. They don't want to have to be restricted by that 50-50 rule. It's the same thing that the historical neighborhood has been formed for.
Right.
So yeah, that's where they benefit. And I understand there's a lot of strict restrictions that go along with being in a historical neighborhood.
Right.
So it's not just to jump in just to get in. So it's for the protection of the property.
Sure.
And to lift up the historical history of the African American people that lived in that area and everybody else.
Right.
It's just to be inclusive and work together in a community. So I've always worked with, and I'm in total support of the historical neighborhood, and we all agree in it. And we're in support of Quinn Chapel being included as long as they want to be included. That's what, you know, we're just trying to build bridges here.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Yep.
Any
You
other
have
questions?
more questions?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right. You do me a favor and give us your name and address for the record, and we'll.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sheila Logan Sims. I'm a lifelong resident of Jefferson City, Missouri. First of all, I want to thank you all for addressing this quickly. Okay.
Will you give me your address, ma'am?
Yes, 820 Lafayette Street. I'm sorry, I
No.
thought I did that. 820 Lafayette Street.
Very good.
Here in Jefferson City. Now, when we talk about expansion of local historic district, I have to tell you something. I've been here a long time. Ain't nothing historic about School Street. Shut up. I'm sorry. I'm here to tell you what the truth is. Ain't nothing historic about School Street. We couldn't even, the coloreds, the blacks, couldn't even go down on that far. Shut up. We couldn't go past Miller Street unless we were going up the street to the grocery store, and then we had to walk on the other side of the street, not School Street side, but the other side that includes where Quinn Chapel is. We had to walk on that side of the street. We couldn't walk on that side, the School Street side, because wasn't no colored folk down there. And we were colored back then, okay? Black folk have been colored, Negro, all kinds of things. Right now, I think y'all calling us African Americans, which I hate. Just to let the record show I hate it. Okay. But the bottom line is, you can't say that it is a historic district if you don't have something historical in the district. Now, I don't know. I wish y'all had called me when y'all were having these first meetings about this historic district, because then I'd have said the same thing then that I'm saying now. You can't have a historic district if you ain't got nothing historical in the district. Amen. Amen. Now, Patsy was talking about the part at School Street that Link University has down there with the tennis courts and so forth and so on. That was a black district. That was for real black history. And it was taken from us under the auspices of creating a better neighborhood. I think what did they call it back then? Urban renewal. Shut up. Urban renewal. It didn't do nothing but renew people's pocketbooks. But it didn't. My dad was a shoe repairman in that area. And I'm going to talk fast because I know you're going to sit me down in a minute, but don't do that, okay? Don't sit me down because I still got some more to say. Anyway, I love that you made but somewhere, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to have that verbiage up there, you've got to put something if you're going to have something to do with African American, you're going to have to put something in that statement that is African American in context. You ain't got no, I'm sorry, and I'm a teacher. I know better than say you ain't got no, but I'm going to tell you, say it anyway. You ain't got no African American stuff in that one. School Street was not. It was not.
I am going to sit you down in a minute.
I know it. I know it. I'm getting there.
You got 1 minute.
Okay. Thank you very much for addressing it quickly. Okay, getting on it. Okay, but I have to tell you, somewhere you got to go back in there and put something. I don't care if you have to rewrite everything. Okay, help me, Holy Ghost. I don't care if you have to rewrite everything, but for it to be a African American historical district, you got to have something in there that was African American. School Street was not. Quinn Chapel is, and that would help make your statement correct. Because I don't want my great niece to look at a historical book and say that it's historical district, and she would be totally twisted. Because when she comes to me, I'm gonna say, girlfriend, it's wrong. Just like a lot of books tell the wrong story about black folk. Guess what? I don't want the city of Jefferson to tell a lie about what was going on at that time. There is nothing historical about School Street.
Very good, ma'am. Thank you. I'm going to cut you off.
You cut me off, don't do it.
I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to do it.
I'm cute. Don't cut me off.
Thank you for your testimony. I
Okay,
gave you
fine.
well over 3 minutes.
Now listen, if you need to have some more information, feel free to call me. Okay, my telephone number is 632-8795, and I'll help you out. You cannot say that this is African American
Thank you, ma'am.
if it ain't no African American history in it.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your testimony. Is there any questions?
Oh, that's the Holy Spirit. Okay, fine.
Okay. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to come forward and speak?
Thank you for being patient with us disabled persons.
You're doing a great job. Give us your name and address for the record, sir.
My name is Glover Brown. I live at 1700 Valley High Road. I'm the executive director of the Friends of Lafayette Street in the Historic Foot District. I have a very personal interest in this issue here. One of the things that I've found a little bit disturbing is that I've attended every entity's meeting, from the Historic Preservation Commission, this body, and the City Council. I've attended private meetings with the applicants who made the application for the local historic district. We have repeatedly asked that Quinn Chapel be included, and at each step of the way, it was denied. I had some personal conversations that were so disturbing that I'm not even going to repeat them here as to why Quinn Chapel wasn't included. I'm looking at the verbiage here, and I think I have to agree with Councilman Fitzwater. This is a piecemeal attempt at trying to resolve an ordinance that was not effective in its beginning. I don't particularly like the verbiage where it says that Quinn Chapel has the right to make application. Make application, when it could have been included in the very beginning. Under that verbiage, that also tends to say, well, maybe Quinn Chapel might not pass the muster in their attempts to make application, because then they fall under the purview of the historic district, who didn't want them in the first place. So I would like to make a request to this body. I have always said I'm on record being in favor of the inclusion of Quinn Chapel into the School Street Historic District. But as you've heard testimony, a lot of the people are kind of shading the issue. It has nothing to do with historic value. It has to do with property values. I'm here for the historic nature. And so what I would like to do is ask that this body make a motion, or however it is legally fit, to make it that this ordinance or this amendment be contingent on the inclusion of Quinn Chapel before it is passed as a school, or excuse me, as a historic district. Because what I'm seeing now is the horse before the cart. That if this is passed here, it's going to go to the city council, and they're going to say, okay, let's pass the ordinance, or let's pass the amendment, pass the ordinance. And so what happens is Quinn Chapel falls back under the purview that it's under now. It's going to have to go back through the process to see if it's going to be approved. I think I'm correct on that. And so if that's the case, then why don't we do this? We've asked the applicants on numerous occasions to either withdraw their application and resubmit it with Quinn Chapel included. They did not want to do that. When they got to the Preservation Commission hearing, it was said that they couldn't do that because—
I'm going to give you 1 minute. You're over.
Okay, they couldn't withdraw their application. Then when it got to this body, they were told that they couldn't do it again. But this body chose to stay neutral. So what I'm asking is this: either make this a contingency that Once Quinn Chapel has been included into the paperwork of the historic district, go ahead and pass the ordinance, include the amendment, so that any future district now has clear guidelines on how to expand their district. You can't expand something if it doesn't exist. So if it goes now before the council, they're going to approve the district, and guess what? It exists. And then they can add the amendment. But there is no guarantee that Quinn Chapel will be included in that historic district. And so if you look at the record, at least 5 attempts have been made to include Quinn Chapel before it got to this. And this was a remand from the council back to this body to reconsider this again with this stopgap measure. So if you can't add the contingency, then I urge you to reject this as it's written.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up.
I'm done.
Very good. Please sit down. Okay. Please sit down.
I want to clarify that I am opposed. You originally had me as being in favor, and I am not. And I want it on the record. I am opposed.
Okay. I will ask city staff to note.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Lori, correct?
Correct.
That Lori is opposed. Do we have any comments for the last testimony? Sir, no. Your time is up and you're not at the microphone, so I'm going to ask that you refrain.
I'm going to ask a question if I can.
Are you going to ask one of the applicant or the testimony or amongst ourselves?
Mr. Brown.
Brown, Mr. Brown, if you would. Why don't you stay there? Let's see what she's got to say. And if you,
I'm an entertainer. I can throw my voice, but no, I want to make sure. No. God is putting it on my heart. Go ahead.
I'm new to this body. This is my second meeting, so I'm still trying to feel my way through the ins and outs of this. And I really don't know, what is your concern? Why is it that you want to be included? Is it because you feel it lends to the flavor of the historic nature of the district? Is it because of financial concerns? Is it, can you just give me a little background on that?
All the testimony that has been given has been focused around financial issues, losing their financial stability in their properties. They've guised it under historic,
the residents of the area,
and they've guised it under historic. That's what has infuriated me from the beginning. They've guised it under historic. You've heard this lady here talk about her neighborhood, and like she said, she's concerned about her property values. But the only thing that has been said about history in this neighborhood was this lady right here when she talked about the church. So if we're going to do history, let's stay with the history of the neighborhood. Quinn Chapel should have been included from the very first thought, and we have had meetings with them prior to their application, and they chose not to include this church.
What, was it because the Quinn Chapel is now housed in a new building?
Well, ma'am, I tell you what, as I said earlier, my conversations were so disturbing that I choose personally not to enter them into the record here. But it was not for the purposes that they are expressing here. Okay. It was not. And I'm very upset that it has even gotten to this point, because all they had to do in the beginning was, when they drew their boundaries, include Quinn Chapel. And every entity that has seen that map can clearly see that it was deliberately excluded. And now that they've been put under the spotlight and the pressure put on, Now they're amenable to whatever measures it takes to get Quinn Chapel in. So let's make this measure worthwhile. Let's make this whole amendment contingent on Quinn Chapel being included in that historic district. And once it has been included, guess what? Then all of that makes sense. All that makes sense.
I think when you go to legislate and make exceptions, you're setting yourself up for failure.
All I'm saying is this, that they had an opportunity to do it once, and now we're here. But now we have certain contingencies on Quinn Chapel being included. They have to make application. They have to go through the whole process, just like the people who made applications for the School Street District.
So you don't have faith that if the district is established and this text is, I'm sorry, you don't have faith that if the district is established without Quinn Chapel and then we pass this, that you don't have good faith that then Quinn Chapel will then be able to be added?
My faith lies in the testimony that has been given on numerous occasions, that they are concerned about their property values, not the history. Now, if Quinn Chapel is sitting there and has been sitting there the whole time, then why have they not chose before now to include it? So now what faith do I have that this ordinance, because it clearly states that Quinn Chapel will have to make application, and the historic district will have some say-so over that application process, because they have criteria that will be in place that can legislate to Quinn Chapel. And so to avoid all of that, let's get Quinn Chapel in place, because there are other neighborhoods that are biting at the bit to create these neighbor or local historic districts. So let's make it, as I've been saying before, let's do it right the first time. I agree with Councilman Fitzwater. Let's don't piecemeal it. So let's go back and do it right the first time. So if it means that the applicants have to go back to the beginning, which is nothing more than to change the language to include Quinn Chapel, give the signatures of the 21 property owners, go back to the Preservation Commission, to this body, and then the City Council. That's all it would take. That's all it would take. And so when that lady back there said, let's do it the right way, that's all we're asking of this body and the council. Thank you.
Mr. Brown. Is there any other questions for Mr. Brown while he's at the podium? Thank you, sir. I will ask once again, is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this request? If so, please come forward. This time I am seeing none. We will now close public testimony. Eric, I think I'll let you speak on anything you need to, or give us a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to try to address some of the questions that were raised during the public hearing, questions and comments. First, regarding the expansion of the district and trying to include other properties that might be separated from the district by I'll call it a short distance, a block or something to that effect. That was a matter that came up at the city council, at the city council's last meeting, literally the one on Monday, and the answer, the response to that is, and kind of twofold there. So one is it is important to, when talking of a historic district, to make sure that the properties that are being included in the district are kind of have a shared history, have a connection to each other. Okay, that if you're talking about two different areas that are fairly removed by a fair distance from each other, that the proper route there would be two separate districts, okay? But I believe that the example that was brought up this evening of houses literally just down the street do have that shared history. Yeah, they may be separated from the School Street area by a block of, what is now, now Lincoln University property, developed with tennis courts, open space. But what used to be there is part of that history that is presented in the narrative on that application. And so expanding the district to either include that property, even though the buildings no longer exist there, or even basically designating the street line, so drawing the district connecting these pieces via the street is a potential option there that seems very logical. Is still a connected area. Obviously, extending a distance very far down a street, and I think you can think of examples of where that would just be a misuse of such a tool. But where an area has a shared history, I think that's very easy to include them in the same area. So including those houses, I think, as an expansion of this district, I believe, is an option. Second, I'd like to, first remind all those in attendance that this is a private application. This is not a staff-initiated request. When I say this, the School Street application was not a staff-initiated request. Was a private application that the staff is processing and sending through the public hearing process. And so, yes, it has been a difficult application to process on the staff side, and I think we've brought up a lot of those reasons why as it's proceeded through that matter. But the expansion of the district, or to include additional properties on there, would have to be a conscious decision by that property owner, not necessarily something brought up during a public hearing. So there does, as Commissioner Vaughn mentioned, that this is in essence the most restrictive type of zoning mechanism, land use control, that can be placed on an area. The strongest tool that the city has available, the establishment of an actual design review board in the form of the historic preservation for any exterior improvements or property improvements that are going to take place on the property. That's a big deal. And so it does need to be a conscious decision by that property owner to be included in the district, or established through a very high threshold, the 75% threshold of that. And so the School Street application did appear in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning Commission took a neutral recommendation on that matter. I won't go into details of why. Those proceedings are available online on YouTube. You can go back and watch them and see why the commission, when they discussed it, came to that conclusion. But that application is in front of the city council right now, and so a lot of the comments I think that were expressed here this evening really need to are probably more properly placed to the city council as they deliberate on that matter. That application is currently sitting on the informal calendar, as I mentioned, a holding position at the city council, but there are opportunities for anyone to speak on any matter that's coming in front of the council on every council agenda. It's just a matter of signing up for that right and appearing in front of the council to give your testimony. That if you're wanting to speak, many of the comments this evening are probably more properly addressed to the city council, and you can do that. You can appear at the meetings, at the city council meetings, and arrange to do so. There's a form that you sign to get on the list to make sure that they don't miss you before the meeting, and then there's a spot on the agenda for the clerk or for the mayor to call on you to speak. And so I hope that addressed a lot of the comments. I hope so. If there are any other questions or anything you think I may have missed, I'd be happy to try to respond.
Eric, I'd like, okay, go ahead. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, one of the things I wanted to do is just confirm, and so it's public, that we don't have any authority to put any contingencies on approval of this amendment.
Not in the manner that's being expressed. No, that's very specific to a case that has already gone through this body and is sitting at the city council. No, the authority you have is really limited to the text amendment that is shown on the screen.
And the only other thing is, so if it's if there is application from 1 or up to 9, what is the process? I mean, that they would go through. I mean, they do an application, but then what's the process?
You mean an application for expansion?
To be expanded under this. How? Yeah, what would be the process?
It would be the same process that the original district went through, the only difference being possibly the signatory component.
Okay, so it'd go to the Historic Commission. And
yeah, it would go through the Historic Preservation Commission as a public hearing. It would go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission as a public hearing, and then after both of those items have occurred, it would proceed to the City Council for a public hearing. And ultimately, it is the City Council that is the decider on the matter.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments from commission members to city staff? Eric, for myself, I think you explained very well what this amendment is here to do. And I do believe that if the application, the original application, needs to be changed or proceed the way it is or whatever, that ultimately needs to be addressed at the city council at this point, where it's at in a holding pattern, as you say. So I do believe that this amendment that we have before us at least gives the opportunity to be included in districts. Yes, I would agree it seems a little bit cumbersome, but those processes have to be done. And my understanding would be is if the original application is amended, once again, it would have to start all over again. Not an attorney, but that's just what I believe would happen, and I think the city attorney is kind of shaking his head. So really what we've been charged here tonight is giving an opportunity, whether it be the Quinn AME Chapel or someone else going forward, to be included in this district or any other district. And once again, I do believe that Eric has said if the true battle for the church at this point is the original application, I'm not trying to pass the buck and put it on our city council, but that's where that application is at that point. That application is not here today. So I'll close with that. Any other comments from commission members? Okay. With that being said, we need to make a motion. Eric, have you provided us a motion?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and the staff recommendation on this matter is for approval. The section of the city code dealing with establishment of local historic districts currently has no procedure for how the boundaries of a district could be amended. And so this text amendment would establish a procedure to allow for that amendment. And so the recommended form of the motion is very simple, and that's motion to approve the proposed text amendment. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
And before we do that and we do a vote, we need to make sure we've got everybody's name for the record. You want to do it after the vote? Okay. We'll do it after the vote. But if everybody would, don't run off on me. I know everybody's going to want to get out of here. It's been a long night. But I think we need to get some clarifications on who testified tonight. So with that being said, do we have a motion?
I move to approve the proposed text amendment.
Second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion carries 5-0. It will be forwarded to the city council. Eric, when will that meeting be?
And so this is on an advanced timeline as well,
Yes.
because there's a pending matter in front of the city council. It's scheduled for a public hearing on August 20th. That's a Monday. Again, 6 p.m. Here in this room.
Okay. And ma'am, you asked about testifying at the city council meeting she should get a hold of the city clerk. Would that be best?
Yeah, you have a couple different options there. One, this is scheduled for a public hearing in front of the city council, and both of those matters are in front of them. And so at that public hearing, you could certainly, express your concerns. Or you can sign up for their agenda and speak on any other topic. I think you show up and you speak on the public hearing on this matter.
I think he's saying you can do either or. Very good. You can do either or. Very good, ma'am.
You could also send an email or a letter. You could write an email or a letter too, if you want to say more than what the allotted time allows.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. I think city staff has reached out to who they need to in the audience. We've got all of the folks tonight. So again, thank you all for being here. That will be forwarded to the city council on August 20th at 6 p.m. Thank you all for coming. Next, we will move on to our other business. Staff updates on prior cases.
So what I wanted to update Planning and Zoning Commission on, the sign code amendments that were presented to the commission at the last meeting and were recommended for approval to the city council with some modifications, most notably removal of limits on the number of signs that could be displayed in residential districts. Staff have forwarded that recommendation onto the city council, but I do want to tell you that staff also made an additional staff recommendation that actually there still be some sort of limit established within the residential district. Now the limit that was established or that was initially proposed to the Planning and Zoning Commission was a fairly complicated formula of allowing for 2 small yard signs on a property plus 2 additional ones per street frontage during an election period, so that a corner lot could potentially have 6 signs or a regular lot 4 signs. Again, kind of a complicated little mathematical formula. What the staff recommended to the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Graham, was to establish a hard limit on residential properties of 10 signs. Just kind of picking a round number that, when driving through the community and observing is something that nearly every property meets anyway, but would not allow very gross misuse of in terms of placing an unlimited number of signs on a property. Also recommended some changes in the number of signs permitted for commercial properties. Again, it's a very similar mathematical calculation of 2 signs plus 2 signs per frontage for commercial properties. They get bigger signs though. Increasing that to 4 signs per frontage, so basically giving them a few more. Again, we were looking for kind of the properties around town that have the largest number of political signs. We were blessed with this being a political season up until literally 2 days ago, so we had very good examples to look at. So we're trying to draw a line there that the majority, if not all, of the community already meets in order to establish an upper limit in order to prevent a very, very obtruse thing from happening in terms of signage. That amendment was voted on by the city council to be included into the bill, this revised staff proposal. They did vote to include that into the bill, so it is now coming in front of them as a substitute bill with those items incorporated. But what I wanted to basically mention to you is that we did make a recommendation that was contrary to the recommendation that the Planning and Zoning Commission put forward, but was, I'll use the word, perhaps a compromise or kind of a higher point that I hope would still address some of the comments from the Planning and Zoning Commission in terms of it, not wanting to be too restrictive on residential signs, but at the same time preserving, the aesthetics of the community from from misuse of that kind of signage option by individual property owners. Be happy to talk to anyone individually if you have any specific questions on that, but I want to bring that to your attention. Recommend on for 10 signs. You recommended 10, yes. So I honestly, I did some driving around. I had a hard time finding a property with 10 on it. So be happy to answer any questions on that. The other thing I wanted to bring up, we have scheduled a special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the purpose of taking up the matter of a fairly major rezoning, the South Side neighborhood rezoning. We've referred to it as South Side rezoning number 1. It's one of the recommendations of the South Side neighborhood plan that was recently adopted. I've presented it to you a couple times before, so we are now moving forward with that process, sending notices out to property owners, putting signs in the neighborhood. I think it was 140 properties that would be proposed for rezoning with this proposal. So we have scheduled a neighborhood meeting that would take place here in the council chambers on Tuesday, August 21st at 5:30 p.m. Again, all the property owners within the area are being notified of that neighborhood meeting. And then the special Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to take that matter up is scheduled for Tuesday, August 28th at 5:15 p.m. That is a departure from our normal Thursday evening meeting times, and also is a special meeting. So I'd ask to please place that on your calendars. I think Ann has already done a survey of the membership to make sure that we can have sufficient numbers of commissioners there to act on the matter. With that, I think that's all I have.
Eric, and our meeting on the 28th will be in this room?
Yes, be in this room as well.
Okay. Anything else from you on other business?
No.
Anything from commission members? If not, we will consider the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. I'll put my pen away that quick.